Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well. With Red Dead Online being almost 5 years old and likely in its final form, in today's video we're going to discuss the fate of the characters of Red Dead Online. I hope you find the video informative, interesting, or at least a little funny. We have a lot of incomplete information from Rockstar, but we're going to hypothesize as well as we can with the information that we have. Settle on in and enjoy. Let's talk about the player character, who is a legend of the West, and we should all be proud of what they actually accomplished. What a life they've lived. They were about to get executed in 1898 for a murder that they did not do. I mean, your character's pretty great. You've helped widows get vengeance. You saved an old man from living in the streets and he's living in your camp with you. Your player character is a legendary hunter, a legendary trader, legendary collector, a legendary bounty hunter, a legendary naturalist. And they've been known to pound back a drink or two. They've been known to defend entire towns from hundreds of outlaws. They also buy every piece of clothing in the land and are known for their exotic fashion sense. Robs trains and gets disgustingly rich. While we don't know the player's exact fate, we do know that although they had all this money, they could never buy a house. And I think it's fair to say by spring of 1899, the player character was nowhere to be found in the 5 states. There is a high likelihood that the player character went into a stable and could not get out. They spent the rest of their days there. Just kidding, maybe they took all their money and bought a plot of land in a new place called Los Santos. So we have our loyal Crips. He's been breaking down animal carcasses for a living since a young age, and he's done tanning hides in Wisconsin sometime during his life. He was also an acrobat for a period of time in Portugal, and we all know about his shenanigans with Limpy Pete and Phil the Crab. They got locked in a vault, those two got hung, and Crips escaped. He doesn't have many friends, but he does know Maggie Fike, and he's known her for about 6 years. Crips meets the player shortly after they're released from custody, and Crips sets up their camp. He moves in there and then just charges them money to stay there. He takes care of managing and organizing the camp, making up the stew. Of course, you gotta provide the ingredients. After being with the player a little bit, Crips gets ambitious and wants to partner with the player to start up a trading company. He needs help buying a butcher table and getting a new wagon. Once the player purchases those items for Crips, they make a lot of money doing some trading where the player does some hunting and Crips does all the tanning and curing, and then the player ends up delivering it to various locations. They make a killing. He also introduces the player to Maggie Fike, who he has a bit of a crush on, who sets up a partnership with the player to set up an illegal distillery. Maggie doesn't seem to have the same feelings for him though, as she did shoot at him jokingly. While we don't know Crips' exact fate, we can assume that he stayed with the player till the end of their days living out in the wilderness, and either died or moved out of the 5 states prior to May of 1899. Let's talk about Maggie Fike. She ran moonshine in Lemoyne. She was being chased down by revenue agents. In 1892, the revenue agents set her moonshine shack on fire, threw her in. Her associate Danny Lee got away, her nephew Lem got captured, and she got out of the fire but was horribly disfigured. Maggie laid low until 1898 and then finally decided to resume doing moonshining. She gets introduced to the player by Crips and then does a number of things to help her get her moonshine operation set up, like rescuing her nephew who's been captured, finding Marcel to help make the moonshine. The player helps Maggie set up the moonshine shack and get vengeance on the former agents, as well as her associate Danny Lee who betrayed her, although she does show mercy to him. Eventually, the player works with Maggie to set up a very profitable business with a dance floor, a band, and the moonshine flowing. The player and their friends have had so many drunken slapfest and dance-offs, people still talk about them till this day. Unfortunately for Maggie, by early 1899, the Lemoyne Raiders have really cornered the moonshine market in Lemoyne, combined with aggressive crackdowns from the law. We do know that all of her moonshine shacks in the 5 states went out of business before May of 1899. While we don't know Maggie's exact fate, that is likely good news. After she lived 6 years as a fugitive, she likely went back to that lifestyle as she was still a wanted woman. She either died or left the 5 states without knowing how much Crips really loved her. Let's talk about Harriet. Harriet is not a fan of Gus's hunting ways, and she's trying to find a closer association with animals. And she uses every cent of that daddy money to do it. She has a scheme where she sells you a sampling kit to bring her animal samples. This becomes a problematic relationship. The player brings Harriet plenty of samples, but she unleashes a torrent of abuse each time the player goes to see her by spraying them in the face. The player, who has Stockholm Syndrome now, continues to give Harriet samples throughout 1898. While we don't know Harriet's exact fate, I think it's fair to say that she probably got mauled by a pack of wild beavers. The next character is Clay Davis along with his brother Clive. They meet the player in 1898 when the player steals a horse for them, and Clay says, "We're going to contact you once we're up and running." No one heard another peep from the Davis brothers in 1898 until they popped their heads up in the middle of 1899, finally setting up their business often seen around Clemens Cove. Let's talk about Gus, who was an avid hunter. He's pretty relaxed right now and will help the player craft trinkets and such. Now, we don't see anything of Gus after 1898. We are going to assume he died of heart disease due to his cigars and meat diet. Let's talk about Bonnie McFarland, one of the rare characters that appears in both Red Dead Online and Red Dead Redemption 1, but not Red Dead Redemption 2. During 1898, Bonnie McFarland is apparently 14 to 15 years old within the lore. And for whatever reason, like a child gangster, she offers the player various work. We know that Bonnie's fate is that she eventually got married and left. However, likely did not get married to the rugged cowboy that she really wanted. Next, let's talk about Jake and Sadie Adler. We know from the events of Red Dead Online and Sadie's dialogue that Jake was a kind and nice man. Sadly, this kindness may have led to him meeting his end, as Jake was killed by the O'Driscolls during a home invasion in May of 1899. While Sadie Adler joined the Vandalin gang to get revenge on the O'Driscolls that killed her husband. And through a tremendous amount of girl bossing, she became a prestigious bounty hunter by 1907. After John and Abigail's wedding, not much is known about Sadie's whereabouts. Hopefully her luck didn't run out. I'd like to think she went out in a blaze of glory. Let's talk about Jessica Leclerc. Sometime prior to 1898, Jessica got married to a dude named Philip Leclerc. They were in love, she became close friends with Grace Lansing, and part of the Blackwater social elite. In 1898, Philip was murdered. A bystander was accused, and that bystander was actually the player. Jessica does some investigation and determines that her former business associates plotted to kill her husband and take control of his business. This all culminates with a shootout in Blackwater, leaving only one co-conspirator of the murder of Philip Leclerc left, and that is Grace Lansing. What we know about Jessica's fate is that her and her bodyguard slash simp, Horley, escaped Blackwater after the shootout to clear their name, and we haven't heard from them since. We also know that she was trying to reclaim her husband's business because the documents that she had from the Lansings were forged. But we know she left Blackwater. We don't know if she was able to clear her name or get vengeance on Grace. We know there was an NPC model for Grace Lansing, it was just never used, so it's safe to say that's probably cut content. Next we have Shaky, a contraband smuggler who mainly works out of Thieves Landing. He has a bad morphine addiction. We meet him in Red Dead Online and can do some jobs for him. Fast forward to 1911, he is working with Irish during the events of Red Dead Redemption 1. John Marston saves Shaky from being tortured, and Shaky helps him in kind. After John and Shaky part ways, we do not see him again after 1911, so his fate is not really known after that point. Let's talk about Capitale Joe. Joe was an associate of Micah and Samson Fitch sometime prior to 1898, and has ties to the criminal network with Guido Martelli with the various blood money missions and opportunities. We know sometime after the events of Red Dead Online in 1898, most likely sometime in the summer of 1899, Joe connects back with Micah and joins the Vandalin gang for a short period of time. It appears he stays with or connects back with Micah by 1907 and is viciously killed by John Marston on Mount Hagen. R.I.P. Capitale Joe, we barely knew ya. Next is Sheriff Freeman in Tumbleweed. The player runs into him in 1898, and Sheriff Freeman looks for some help outside of his jurisdiction to take out some outlaws. Sheriff Freeman stayed the Sheriff of Tumbleweed till at least 1907, and sometime before 1911 the town was abandoned, and he either left or died. The next one is Guido Martelli, who contacts the player in 1898 with a really interesting opportunity. To collect fake Italian crime money called Capitale. He'll also pay some money to help us embarrass a politician by stealing their precious jewels. Sometime after the death of Angelo Bronte in 1899 and before 1907, Guido Martelli took the lead of the Saint Denis crime family, up to the point that if you went to the police station and he wanted you dead, he could have you dead. We are unsure of Guido Martelli's fate after 1907, as there is no further mention of him. Like his predecessor though, we can assume he died pretty soon. The next one we'll talk about is Madame Nazar. Not a whole lot is known about her, except the fact that by 1898, she traveled to the US to sell her wares and collect rare goods from the region. And she has made our player disgustingly rich over the last few years. sometimes paying double and triple cash for rare collectibles. I kinda wish she would collect me, just saying. From what we can tell, she left the 5 states sometime before May of 1899. Although she's very mysterious, many question whether she was ever here at all. Well, if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this revisiting of some of the Red Dead Online characters as much as I did. Stay tuned for some more Red Dead lore videos. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.